Hiya! Today I'll be doing a review of Netflix's compelling hit series You, starring Penn Badgley, James Scully and Victoria Pedretti, who are arguably the three main characters in the series, along with obviously a cast of many other talented actors and actresses. In this review there'll be some spoilers, so if you haven't watched the series and you plan to, probably best to click off now. But otherwise, let's do it! You is a psychological thriller based on the book You by Carolyn Kepnes, which was published in 2014. The screenplay was then developed by Greg Berlanti and Sarah Gamble in order to make this production possible. The first episode was aired on September 9th, 2018 and has continued successfully to this day and has become a hit show among audiences across the world. It's got 2 seasons and 20 episodes in total. Penn Badgley, the main character who plays Joe Goldberg in You, is known for his roles as Dan Humphrey in Gossip Girl, while also starring in Easy A, The Stepfather and Margin Call. Alongside him is the unsuspecting, innocent Elizabeth Lail, who also starred in Once Upon a Time, The Blacklist and The Good Fight. In Season 1, the series opens with a voiceover from Badgley playing Joe Goldberg, who is a former bookstore manager at Mooney's in New York. His eyes set upon the alluring, beautiful Guinevere Beck, who is played by Elizabeth Lail, as mentioned, an aspiring writer. And he slowly and meticulously becomes infatuated with her, preying upon her, watching her every move and tracing her steps until he achieves the object of his desires, which is Beck herself. The way Badgley characterises Joe is in a way to make him so lovable and such a relatable character that the audience feels almost guilty for understanding such a psychotic, uncanny character, and Joe becomes our guilty pleasure. Some critics have said that we almost side with Joe when he kills Beck, which is a spoiler, sorry. Beck is a nickname that Goldberg uses in order to bring them closer together, that mutual understanding, which is a little hint that maybe viewers didn't see or didn't notice, but the way he calls her, the way his voice lends itself to her name is in a way as to bring them closer, and is a psychotic or psychological way of essentially creating that understanding between them so that he can bring himself closer to her and eventually, unfortunately, kill her. This psychotic character that Badgley makes is due to his fantastic ability in portraying a sinister yet sympathetic, to us, stalker. I think one of the most tantalising and evocative parts of Season 1 was the fact that Joe would literally stop at nothing to get Beck, to achieve Beck, even if that means murder. The way Badgley played the role was so likeable, almost puppyish, and it made you feel as if murder, this might sound crazy, but it made you feel as if murder was almost a justifiable means to an end. And this was all to achieve Beck, the object of his desires. He went to such a deep extent, such a far extent to achieve her, to make her his. It's so weird and mind-bending in its own right as well, that it literally bends your mind to think of prevalent topics in society today, such as social media, toxic relationships, and technology in a new light. I think also that the director's choice to give Badgley the ability to have so many voiceovers in both seasons is to give Goldberg such a striking presence, that he asserted so much dominance, and not just physically or visually, but also by audio, by attacking your ears. It felt like he was watching you all the time, not just Beck. It felt like he was literally watching you, the viewer. He could track you, he could predict your every move, and that's something that I used to sympathise with Beck, to how she must have been feeling, to how yet unsuspecting yet innocent she was. She could never have known Goldberg's intentions. And even more odd is the fact that Badgley played Joe in a way that we viewed what he was doing as normal, which is so scary. But the scariest of all is the fact that he saw murder and physical violence and stalking as a justifiable way to achieve Beck. Throughout the whole of season 1, characters are systematically introduced and killed off. Sounds dark, but it's true. Obviously by Joe. Who else? He acts as a predator, stopping at nothing to get what he wants. And this is due in part to the close-ups, the long shots, the extreme close-ups, where we really see Goldberg's facial expressions and the way that Badgley characterised him in order to let us see his vulnerable side. Though he didn't use that as a weakness, he used that as a way to exploit the other characters, to reel them in, to trap them, psychologically, physically, and by audio. We all knew that Beck was heading to her own demise. And it made me feel like I just wanted to shout from the street, "Run, Beck, run, get out of there!" But I couldn't. But the fact itself that we knew Beck was heading to her own demise, which was largely in part accompanied by the fantastic musical composition by Blake Neely, who is the composer for the music in the series, this really set the tone for the scene and what was going to happen. When she found out what she had got herself into, we just wanted to get her out of there, the audience. We wanted to just help her. But the fact that we couldn't meant that Joe was always one step ahead. Of Beck, of Benji, of us. He was calculated. He was cold. He was precise. If you thought, what's for dinner one night, Joe already knew what he was having for dinner for the whole week. The series then ended on a cliffhanger, with Beck being killed by Joe, rather coldly I thought, for someone who had such a deep love and intensity for someone. The way he killed her was almost inhumane, and he showed no remorse with the open body language, the morbid facial expressions, and the pain Elizabeth Lael showed when she died. Badgley almost brushed it off with no regard, simply letting her die, acknowledging, this is the end. This is what it's come to. I didn't want to do this, but this is what it's come to. But in the end, that was one of the most gut-wrenching, tearful moments of season 1, especially for me. But it didn't end there. No. In the end, Joe's ex-girlfriend, who we all thought was dead, the way the script was made so meticulously and precisely made us think that Joe's ex-girlfriend, Candice, who is played by Amber Childers, was dead. That's what we thought. We thought she was dead. But with a ring of Mooney's doorbell, in steps the luscious ginger-haired princess Candice, who later we find out is as psychotic as Joe. But this moment, when she came in, it left us on a cliffhanger. What comes next? What new things will present itself in season 2? Will there be a method to the madness? So begins season 2, following a similar template just in a new city, Los Angeles, the City of Angels. It seems at the end of season 1, Joe decided to start afresh and he wants to be a better person until he finds Love Quinn, played by the incredible Victoria Pedretti. In the first instance, when I saw Love, I knew she was a character who was as delicate as her name. The slow motion cinematography, the still portrait shots of her smiling, even later in the series when she was wearing relaxed dresses all the time, her clothing was very bright and vivid and beautiful, and the way she held herself was so elegant and graceful. It completely contrasted Joe's almost meticulously morbid nature. The way he was so predatorial and horrible in his own personality was just a complete contrast, and it really set the tone for their relationship. Unlike the last season, I felt more disconnected to Joe in season 2. Perhaps it was because, as compared to the previous season, Joe didn't get as much screen time, or Badgley didn't get as much screen time as he did in season 1. Everyone knows a director's decision comes after a long thought process, so every decision is made with reasoning behind it. So the fact that the director chose to give Badgley less screen time was interesting. Yet, of course, Joe doesn't need all the screen time, because even if he's on screen for 2 minutes, he can convince you of anything no matter what. And that is the freakiest part of all. And that is why I really think that our guilty pleasure is Joe. Because no matter how long he's there, no matter what he does, somehow, some way, through Badgley's intense and creative characterization of Joe, he finds a way to entice us into believing what he does is justified. Daniel Addario from Variety Online said he fit in among self-styled literary types in New York. To quite a large extent, I do agree with this. Daniel Addario from Variety Online said he fit in among self-styled literary types in New York. To quite a large extent, I do agree with this, because when he set himself up with living in wellness-addicted Los Angeles, he was very much outside of his comfort zone, and that really translated through his body language and his facial expressions, the way he was around other people. He kind of had this almost superior godlike complex, in my opinion. That's how I found it. It was like he knew better. He always was above you. It was almost like a gazelle in an open field, always wary, always cautious, and making sure its moves are calculated and precise so as to avoid being snatched up and eaten. When he was in New York, he was at home. He was surrounded by books. He knew the city like the back of his hand. We knew Joe was calculated. It was like we knew he belonged in New York almost. And when he was in Los Angeles, he was outside of his comfort zone. It was interesting, though, that Goldberg instantly got a job in the open market where Love and 40 is Love's brother, where they work. And he worked as an assistant in the bookstore area, of course, and that was quite fitting. So it was like he was planting seeds so that he could grow and that he could excel in his environment. Another critic, Robin Barr, says the writing is self-consciously hip, though sometimes mistaking literary references for inherent intelligence. I don't believe that the writing mistook literary references for inherent intelligence. I think the writing was intended to highlight Joe's inherent intelligence and increase, therefore, the intelligence of others. Because it was especially the case with 40, Love's brother, who is an outcasted, demoralised, aspiring filmmaker who is looked down upon by his father due to his constant requests for financial loans. Joe, I think, has an acute awareness of the social fakery that occurs in Los Angeles, where it's completely contrasted to New York, where everyone seems to keep it real almost, to act in a more humane and methodical approach, whereas Los Angeles is very flowery and out there and flamboyant and eccentric. And I think that's really what made Joe an outcast as much as 40 in its own right. I think also the script lended itself to that notion, to battle the stigma surrounding Los Angeles today, which is a flowery, self-absorbed, fame-hungry city in a greedy capitalist country. And the script itself really highlighted Joe's isolation, but showcased how he was trying to fit in with the environment that he was in. But I think what was most striking about this season is that Joe, who finds himself to be smarter and slicker than everyone else is, found himself actually to be more out of his depth in sunny Los Angeles. And that's where Love, 40, and Jenny Ortega, who plays Ellie Alves, a young girl who lives in the same apartment block as Joe and who is years beyond herself in terms of wisdom, where even she challenges Joe. And they create a bond together, which is eventually manipulated and whatnot, and that's just the way Joe is, because he's a psychotic killer. There is a common tactic, I think, deployed here, in Season 2 as well as in Season 1, and I've thought about this. When Joe kills Henderson, who is a famous comedian in this series, Henderson plays a famous comedian and he is played by the real-life comedian Chris D'Elia, who is friends with underage Alves, and when he invites her to her house, he spikes her drink, and he obviously tries to take advantage of her. But the common tactic is that Joe builds a friend, he builds a connection, he builds that rapport, and not only does he build the rapport with the character in the series, this ultimately ends up building a rapport with the audience who watches him, who really colludes with him, almost. It's like you're colluding with the devil. It's crazy, but it's the way it is. And when he murders someone to protect them, the way Badgley characterizes Joe in season 2 is so as to remind us of how this whole concept of murder being a justifiable means to an end. And that is the craziest part of everything. Where it got tricky though was when Candice came back and played a really big role as Forty's lover, using Forty almost as a passage to get Joe. She wants to break him. She wants to destroy him. She wants to manipulate him the way he manipulated her. She wants to completely break him. And you could really see that through the really close-ups of Candice, through the tracking shots, through the extreme close-ups, where you could really see her facial expressions, her demeanour as a power-hungry woman, as a woman who knows her worth, who can stand her ground, and who's clearly been through something. So in one episode, when Joe and Love go to a party or a wedding, I can't remember what it was, but Forty and Candice come as well, because they're a couple, and Joe and Love are a couple. The way the scene is structured is so tense and so eerie that you can really see Joe trying to keep order, trying to maintain order within the chaos that is occurring, because he doesn't want Love to find out who he really is, obviously, and only Candice knows that. And they're all together in this little bubble, and it's so tense, it's just so gripping, and it's incredible because it's a complete contrast to New York, like with Beck, when everything was so meticulous, ordered and precise and calculated. It's the complete opposite here, when anything can happen. And the best part is, you never, ever know what is around the corner. Another common feature of both seasons was a new lover. After a serious altercation upon finding out Joe's true identity, which Love eventually does, she breaks up with him. And this sends Joe spiraling, literally spiraling. You could see it. The way the camera was always focused on him, the way his body language became closed, like he was planning something, like he was spiraling, but he knew how to handle it. And it was weird. It was crazy weird. It was almost like we were his friend, and we were there for him, and we felt sympathy towards Joe. That's why he's our guilty pleasure, which allowed us to identify with him on a more personal, sympathetic level, which we hadn't done before. With the introduction as well of this Australian lover who comes into the picture, Love's new boyfriend, this was like Dr. Nicky or Benji in the first season, where Beck found a new lover and Joe became jealous. Again, this theme of manipulative jealousy comes into play, and that's what this season evoked so well. This manipulative jealousy coming in and being used to Joe's advantage, and ultimately being used to predict the demise of Love or Candice, or I'll get onto that. When I saw that rage and frustration though, and what Joe wanted to do to this overpowering, muscular Australian jock, it really translated through Joe's body language and tension in his facial expressions. Again, Neely's composition as well with music really aimed and in fact did help to heighten the tension, the fury and the passion in this scene as well. The ending though is what hit me the most. It's almost a cyclical structure, with episode 10 being titled Love Actually, where Joe wanted to start fresh, but has returned to his old ways. Oh, Joe. Joe. Joe trapped Delilah, his neighbour, and Alves' sister. Delilah is the sister of Alves, who I mentioned before. And this time, this cage that he used, which was in Mooney's basement, is now in a warehouse. And he promises to set Delilah free after she figures out everything about Joe. He promises to set her free after 16 hours. However, he returned to a mutilated body. Shocker. This was more sickening though than when Joe grinded a body in a blender. Literally, this was actually one of the things that the show was criticised on for being too gory. Because in one scene it showed Joe grinding a body through a blender. And this was sickening. It was horrible to watch. But it really helped, I believe, to highlight the true monstrosity behind Joe's actions and the true monster that is living inside Joe. This gave off like Human Centipede vibes. It was terrible. But believing he was the one who killed Delilah because he had took acid, which is a drug. He took acid with 40 the night before, and he hallucinated, and he was the one who thought that he had killed Delilah. But a shocking revelation came. It was love. Love killed Delilah. And when I found out, I was mind-boggled. I was like, what? What do you mean? You mean innocent, flowery, calm, beautiful little love who just minds her own business and does her own thing? She killed Delilah? No way. But it was her. And she also admitted to not only killing Delilah, but also killing the childminder who sexually assaulted her brother 40 when they were younger. So really, who's the real monster here? Candice basically spilled everything. She made everything come to light. She was the one who really brought out everything and the truth. The thing is though, with Love and Joe, there is no breaking that bond between two psychos, because they're just as bad as each other. They are bound together by a rope, by a string, whatever you want to call it. It turns out that they would become a family. Another shocking revelation. Love reveals she is pregnant. And the serenity in her character really contrasted with Joe's horrible, nasty, spiteful, vindictive character, which was subtle. It wasn't vindictive as a stereotype, I should say, of a abusive boyfriend who is, you could clearly see the overpowering, the physical, horrible nature. It was subtle. He was manipulative, but it was subtle. And that completely contrasted with Love's character, which was incredible. That dynamic between them really enticed me and made me watch on even more. Also for viewers as well, who have been on the journey since season 1, episode 1, we all knew Joe had finally achieved his goal. What he had always wanted. A perfect family. But it's not over. Moving to the suburbs, the last scene shows Joe peeking through his garden fence and spying on his neighbour reading a book. With the last line, and this is going to be my impression of Joe. This is just the beginning. Because this is where I had to be, exactly where I had to be, to meet you. There you were with your books and your sunshine, so close but worlds away. I will figure out a way to get to you. See you soon, neighbour. Ah, the chills. The chills that went through my spine when I heard that. I had just thought, release season 3 tomorrow, please. So, all in all, I would recommend it. I would say, honestly, 9 out of 10. It would be an honest 9 out of 10 for me. The last thing that would make it a 10 out of 10 is if I could see Joe becoming more raw and becoming more vulnerable, because what we see is Joe's strong, powerful nature, and even when things don't go his way, he always finds a way to make a method out of the madness. And I want to see something where perhaps a scene or a whole episode where it's focused on Joe's downfall, on his emotions, on his vulnerability. And I really think, as much as I don't want to, that will bring me closer to him. But all in all, the screenplay, the cinematography, the shots, the facial expressions, the body language, the way Badgley and Lael and Pedretti, Ortega, Delia, the way they've all characterized their characters in their own respective ways has become a trademark of the series. And it's really helped to heighten and to build the plot and essentially bring us in closer to the action and really help us to understand why Joe is the way he is, which is sickening. But I guess there's just some people out there who are just psychotic killers, and it's weird, I know, but that's the way it is. So I look forward to season 3. I don't know when it's being released, but reports say 2021. So we will see, and a review will come then. This has been my review of You on Netflix. Hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.